Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Friday, December 20th. Derek VanRiper, Sarris here with you on this episode. We get you caught up on a lot of news from around the league. We've got a few trades and signings, mostly signings to talk about because free agency is rolling along. I'm still grateful that Juan Soto signed during the winter meetings because had that not gone down when it did, I think we could be in one of those brutal December lulls. That is not the case whatsoever. Cody Bellinger has a new home. We'll talk about that. Christian Walker is on the move. Got a few pitchers landing in interesting places. We got no trade clauses being utilized, all sorts of good stuff. Eno's got to send in his Hall of Fame ballot soon. You still got, 8 days, 10 days to
I already got a gentle reminder from the Hall of Fame that it's due. I've got 11 days to send it, but I guess they want it. And I have 9 of my possible 10 votes clicked, and we'll talk about why the 10th is just so hard for me right now.
So it's paper and you used ink. So those 9 really are locked in, right? You're not going to do a whiteout on a vote, are you?
Yeah, I had the thought like, oh, no, I'm not crossing something out on there.
I wonder if not Mr. Tibbs has ever spotted whiteout on a Hall of Fame ballot.
Yeah,
I've never noticed it.
You would, considering the 1980s dot matrix printer ass ballot we've got here.
Hey, some things are so good, you just got to let them be. Don't change a classic. If you want to join us in our Discord, we'll be hanging out there throughout the holidays, off and on, checking in. A lot of good conversation happening there. Link is in the show description. Let's start with the news, though. Let's start with the Cody Bellinger trade. The Cubs did actually get a player back, right? Cody Petit did go back to the Cubs, but this was basically a salary dump where the Cubs, once they made that move for Kyle Tucker, were probably +1 on position players, but certainly spending at a level that they maybe were uncomfortable with at the ownership level. So expectations that Bellinger was going to move only intensified. He lands in a great spot at Yankee Stadium. We talked about this as one of the best possible fits. The other angle here, though, just from how Cody Bellinger meshes in the Bronx, is being a center fielder. At least being average in center field gives them a solution at a position where they were either going to keep playing Aaron Judge, who's been below average as a center fielder, or possibly put Jason Dominguez out there. And even Dominguez's defense in center has some question marks. So I think this provides some stability in that you get 3 guys now playing in spots that are just flat out better for them. And that's without even digging into the impact of Cody Bellinger as a left-handed hitter moving into Yankee Stadium for half of his games.
Yeah, I was just looking at this spray chart, which takes Cody Bellinger's balls from last year and just overlays them onto Yankee Stadium. You can see how, looks like 8 to 10 more homers almost. Of course, It doesn't work that way because Wrigley, the wind is famously important, and the wind has affected some of those balls. Also, this is all of his balls, not half of the balls in play that he would have hit. So, Yankee Stadium's only going to be his home for half of the time. But, he doesn't have to deal with Mount Baltimore that much. He doesn't hit balls that their direction. So, he actually lines up pretty well for Fenway and Baltimore and definitely Yankee Stadium. So this is something that's right up his alley. He pulls fly balls. He doesn't pull them extremely hard. And the bat speed may be falling off. The reason this deal happened is because Cody Bellinger is only projected to be a slightly above average regular, and he's due $50 million over the next 2 years. And that's a little bit above. It's kind of like right at what you would spend on that. That's why they could have just put him on waivers and let him get claimed. But I do think he's a great fit for where he's going. And for fantasy players, he's going to hit the upper ends of his power projections. And he's now up to 23 homers projected. I think he could get close to the 26 that he hit in Chicago. I don't think he's going to steal a bunch of bases. So I'd give him maybe a 250 average, 25 homers, and 8 steals next year. Pretty good for runs and RBI. So I think this is a good situation for him to land in. I don't know how he's going to age if he's only projected for 2.5 wins, and that the market already sort of said he's only worth exactly his contract, if that. So, there's some questions about how much dynasty value he has, how much long-term value he has. But for the Yankees, it's like, hey, 2 years. For the Cubs, on the other hand, I think they may want to start discussions with Kyle Tucker on an extension maybe during the season, and not being on the hook for Cody Bellinger's next year $25 million might have been just as important as this year's. You know what I mean? Like, because that's a player option. If they think he's most likely going to, use that player option again, and we have to have that $25 million on there, and on top of that, we have like 6 outfielders now. So it was a kind of a fit situation. I think they would have loved to put Cody Bellinger in the deal back to the Astros, but I guess the Astros weren't into that. On the other, as far as what Cody Poteet does, he's like a 30-year-old lefty starter with a really poor strikeout rate. I looked at Stuff Plus. The new Stuff Plus has him at a 79 Stuff Plus. So I don't know. I think he's maybe a 6th starter that you can sneak onto the active roster as a lefty reliever.
Well, Poteet's a righty, but it's still.
Why did I say why did I think he was he should be a lefty with that name?
Soft tossing. Yeah. Soft tossing name, soft tossing K rate. So then you just immediately make him a lefty.
93-mile-an-hour fastball. I just assumed. I don't know what you would do with him on the roster, but let's see if he has options left. He has options left, so there you go. He is a 6th starter you put in the minors for a year.
Yeah, the model likes the slider, so you put him in the pen. Maybe he throws a little harder with the fastball as a slider-heavy guy, and middle relief is also a possibility. It gives you some depth. It really was more about clearing the money than anything else. And having the possibility of extending Kyle Tucker certainly increases with the Bellinger money off the books. Again, because of the way they want to run their budget in Chicago.
What I hope they don't do is spend the money on Alex Bregman. And I like Alex Bregman as a character and as a player in the short term. But in terms of his play, I did some research today and looked at the fact that he saw a 3% increase in balls in the zone this year. 3 percentage points. So he saw a big increase. In only 2 guys 30 and over saw a bigger increase. Their names were Nolan Arenado and Nick Castellanos. 2 guys who've been rumored to be on the block, 2 guys who we don't think are going to age that well, 2 guys that nobody's really excited about the future for. And here Alex Bregman's out here asking for maybe close to $200 million contract. I looked at all previous 30-year-olds that had large increases in zone rates like this. And what I found 33. 6 of them never were regulars again.
Okay.
It was basically the end of their career for 6 of them. 8 of them dropped more than 20 points in WRC plus the next year. So year 3, right? Year 1 to year 2 is the big zone increase. Year 3. 8 of them dropped more than 20 points in WRC plus and might have been regulars, but were not good ones the rest of their careers. So almost half the sample basically was the end of their career. Now, even among the ones that were okay in year 3, we had a lot of guys who weren't good again. Martin Prado in 2016 had one last good year, and that was it. Alex Gordon in 2018, one last good year, and that was it. Robbie Cano in 2018, one last year, and that's it. So if you take and add even guys who were better in year 3, who it still was the last good year of their career, you get past half of the sample. Now, I do think there's a difference between Alex Bregman and Nolan Arenado and Nick Castellanos. He's got a really small zone that he swings in. He's got a really good sense of the strike zone. He makes good contact. There are reasons to like him. He plays good defense. So I do think he'll be on the better range of this, but it is something to worry about. It is a reason, we've seen the opposite of this, where there's a baseball prospectus piece that found that if pitchers start avoiding the heart of the zone, that's actually a sign of a breakout. You can actually start to see a breakout happening in the way that pitchers treat batters. And it makes total intuitive sense, And so, of course, the opposite is true. If they're just filling up the zone, if they're attacking you in the heart of the zone, they do not respect you.
Or I think your bat slowed down. Yeah, there's reasons, but sure, yes, it's a concern.
Not a good one. Yeah,
definitely a concern. Well, the other reason I don't want the Cubs to sign Alex Bregman, I guess it's twofold. One, my rooting interest. Two, more importantly, Matt Shaw. I think Matt Shaw is ready for the big leagues. I think we talked about the possibility of Shaw having a role once Isaac Paredes got traded. But the more you look at Matt Shaw, I think the more you see a guy that could do a little bit of everything for us from a fantasy perspective, and maybe a lot of everything. I saw some pretty aggressive grades on his tools from Eric Longenhagen over at Fangraphs. Overall 55 future value, but you're talking about 60 raw power, 60 speed, already average defense with the room to be an above average defender, even playing third base. That's sort of a newer position for Matt Shaw. There's a lot to like here, and it may be from day one. I mean, I think it's his job to lose as the depth chart is built right now. I think it's probably a good sign that Gio Urshela signed with the A's. It's just the kind of guy that could have signed with the Cubs that would at least delay the everyday opportunity for a player like Matt Shaw. So there's still a lot of offseason left to go. But looking at Matt Shaw right now, from a pure fantasy perspective, sitting outside the top 200 overall in NFBC drafts this week, great value where he's going. A guy that I think could maybe be a rookie of the year contender in the National League. I think there's a lot of boxes he ticks that could put him in that conversation. Great strike zone judgment as well. Sub 20% K rates at each of his minor league stops. Double-digit walk rates last season at AA and AAA. So, this is like one of the bigger internal winners of the offseason just based on things happening around him.
Yeah, and, traditionally projections hew very close to league average or worse for rookies. And Steamer although Steamer is among the projection systems that might be a little bit more upbeat about rookies, in the pantheon of projection systems. Given all that, a 250 average with 16 homers and 15 stolen bases, 6% bid on league average and plus defense, they say he can be an above average player right now. So I do think that if looking at this depth chart for the Cubs, that with the surgery for Nico Horner and the fact that they're looking at a rookie possibly at third base, they did say, Jed Hoyer did say recently that he's not just going to hand it to him. But when you say something like that to somebody, you're also acknowledging that they are the front runner, right? I would maybe suggest that the Cubs sign somebody like a Josh Rojas. He's a left-hander. Shaw's a right-hander. Just gives you, a soft landing there. Maybe you do a platoon at third. He also has played second base, and he could play second base for you if Nico Horner is delayed coming back. I don't think Josh Rojas is a great player, but he's projected to be about a one-win player, and I think that could be something they could do. I think the rest of the money should be spent on pitching, possibly a closer. I think a Tanner Scott would do a lot for this team and might be worth the expenditure.
Yeah. The main competition for Matt Shaw as the roster is built right now is a Rule 5 pick, Gage Workman. Great defender, has power, played at AA for all of 2024 in the Tigers organization.
So maybe they keep him, but he's like, he's got a real problem with making contact.
Yeah, 27.5% K rate at AA as a 24-year-old is why was he available in the Rule 5 draft? But there's power, there's speed, 18 homers, 30 steals, 280, 366, 476. It was a 140 WRC plus for Gage Workman at Erie. So just got kind of bumped off that roster in Detroit because of a little bit of a 40-man crunch, I guess, and could be an opportunity for the Cubs to at least get a solid bench option, right? A guy that can...
That 27.5% strikeout rate was like the second best of his minor league career. So just to give you a sense of the other numbers are higher.
Yeah. Yeah, that wasn't just hitting AA and struggling. That was just sort of the way it is. But I'm all in on Matt Shaw right now at the current price for redraft purposes because it does sound like the additions will be somewhere else on the roster. Let's get to a deal that just went down on Friday. Christian Walker has agreed to a 3-year deal with the Astros. And this helps to answer a broader question you were starting to kick around with the Astros. Like, how good are they right now? Because the news of the week for Houston had been that Nolan Arenado blocked a trade to go there. And that may have been because of the uncertainty with Bregman, their decision to trade away Kyle Tucker. You know, if you're Nolan Arenado, you probably want to play for a championship as opposed to being on a team maybe floating for a wild card. But I think the Astros still have aspirations of winning the division. I think they still see themselves more as playing for now than playing for the future, despite the Tucker trade. And this could be any number of reasons why Arenado didn't want to go there. But Walker going there is great for them because he fills a clear and obvious need. And now that you add Christian Walker for 3 years, I assume you're going to move Isaac Paredes over to third base as sort of your default combo on the corners. You and I talked about Walker, I think in the free agent predictions episode, and he made a lot of sense as a possibly less expensive option compared to Pete Alonso, because aside from the thump, Christian Walker is a very good defender, a great defender at first base.
Yeah. And he's going to be cheaper, and the deal's going to be shorter than it will be for Pete Alonso just because of his age. And those are the reasons why you might be worried about him. He's 33 and 8 months, so his seasonal age for this coming season is 34. So you're going to have him for his 34, 35, and 36 seasons. There's a lot of risk there. We know from Jeff Zimmerman's work that the projections for a player this old are less reliable. We know that at any moment they can kind of go in the tank. And also, Walker himself has seen his strikeout rate rise. But I will say that he's been productive with this kind of strikeout rate in the past. Even his big sort of breakout rookie season, he had a 25.7% strikeout rate. Last year it was 24% for Christian Walker. So, he is just more of a kind of a 3 true outcome guy at the plate. And sometimes he gets a little bit lofty with the swing, 47% fly ball rate last year. So he's not going to be a batting average guy, but I do think, around a 330 OBP, plus defense. And then, when you look at his batted ball stats in context, you don't even need to limit him to the limit a first baseman. If you just look at the top 25 qualified hitters that are in the top 25 for both barrel percentage and hard hit rate. So do they hit the ball hard, and do they hit the ball hard in the right angles? He's on this list. There's about 17 players. They're all like the best hitters in baseball. Judge, Ohtani, Soto at the top. And if you say, Christian Walker is going to be one of the worst players on this list, then you're saying that he will be, Cal Raleigh, Kyle Schwarber, Matt Chapman esque, and, Cal Raleigh aside, I think he's a little bit underappreciated, but that's the risk, as he kind of goes to like a 210 batting average. It's still a really good hitter. I think any team would want that. And I think the Astros in particular have prioritized contact over balls in play a little bit in power. And this is a way for them to maybe balance out their lineup. And if Paredes is not going to hit for a ton of power, he's going to make contact. Walker is kind of a foil to him, where he's got a great sense of what to swing at the plate. He's going to drive what he can drive, and he's going to swing and miss sometimes. So I think it's a really good deal. I know that the strikeout rate's going up. He's old, but it was only a 3-year deal. I think the worst case scenario is he's pretty good next year. He's a little bit less good in year 2, and in year 3, you're looking already to improve upon him. But maybe you can improve upon him at the trade deadline or whatever it is. And one last graphic I want to throw up here is that old graphic that we had of the different positions. This is post Kyle Tucker, but pre the most recent signings. And what you'll see is that the Astros had the worst first base situation. It's in bold and white there. The Astros had a 1 WAR situation at first base. It was the worst among contenders. And they just clicked that up, a few notches with this. And they took their worst situation and made it better. And if you now look at the depth charts, the Astros are in a virtual tie, or actually an actual tie in projected WAR with the Mets, and are the fifth best team in baseball. So I wonder if Arenado didn't make a mistake.
It's hard to say, because if he ends up with the Dodgers, then he's right.
That's like what everyone's saying on social media, is that's the gambit. He's just waiting for the Dodgers to get him out. But the Dodgers, they only need him if he's like basically free. Like, do they really need to spend on this kind of an upgrade off of Max Muncy? Like, how much of an upgrade is he off of Max Muncy?
Defensively, still quite a bit.
Yeah.
And then you play Muncy at second, as long as you feel good about that. And Gavin Lux is your super utility, I guess, and life goes on. So I don't know. I think the bigger question with Arenado is just like, how much of his decline is health related, and then within even the health related aspects of his decline, how much of that is reversible? How much of that heals? How much of that back problem that's plagued him really since the end of 2023, right? It wasn't just last season. It was the end of 23 where this first became an issue. How much, if any, of that can go away over an off season with a new strengthening program? We're talking about a guy who's already 33 years old. He's going to be 34 a few weeks after opening day in April. So I think he's a good player, or a useful player at this point, but I don't know if we're getting a bounce back to even the 2023 level of power output. I don't know if that's necessarily coming. And maybe it's more of a 18 to 20 homer profile, above average defense, decent contact skills, but really a guy you'd rather have hitting sixth in a really good order as opposed to being in the heart of the order.
Yeah, he's a guy who has done some bat speed training with some weighted bats, and he actually illustrates a little bit of a question that I had from a team, is how sticky are weighted bat gains in bat speed, and do you basically have to make it part of your routine, every day or every week or whatever, to keep those things? Because if you look at Arenado's rolling bat speed last year, he peaked at around average, but it was really, really bad. He was like, bottom 10th percentile in bat speed last year. And he had a pretty impressive run where he pushed his bat speed to average, and then it fell off. So that just makes me feel like maybe some aspects of that training are unsustainable given the state of his body. Like maybe it takes a toll on your body to do bat speed training that way. It does make sense. If you're swinging the bat really hard, you have to decelerate too. There's all parts of the oblique, the back, all sorts of things that come into play. So, and then we have the pitchers telling us they're not afraid of him anymore.
Right. You mentioned him earlier. He was one of those guys that saw that big increase in pitches inside the strike zone. It's coming off of a season. Arenado's coming off a season with a career worst barrel rate, 3.2%, career worst hard hit rate, 31.2%. So yeah, on the one hand, I'll always be like happy for the players that earn the no trade clause and have it. You have it, use it. You don't want to go to Houston. You don't want to go to Milwaukee. You don't want to go wherever. Use it. That's your right as a player. I'm just looking at him and saying, okay, how much of an upgrade is he? And thinking about that chart from before, which teams need help at third base? Okay, look, the Brewers have the worst third base situation in the league. If Nolan Arenado's free, they're better off with Arenado than probably what's behind door number 2. That's fair to say. The Mariners might be in that situation. Even the Dodgers are kind of borderline in terms of projection that they have there now.
Bottom 3 among contenders. But
2.8 WAR is what he's projected for by Steamer. So he'd be a slight upgrade, but not the upgrade that you would have expected at other points in his career.
The money situation is that I believe he's owed like $75 million for the next 3 years, but the Rockies are paying 10 of it. So you've got 3 years, $60 million, I believe.
That's where it gets a little hairy too. It's like maybe you like him for this year, but you don't necessarily like him for 26 and 27 as well. It's an extended version of the Bellinger thing, where it's that's why the return's going to be underwhelming. If the Cardinals find a situation he wants, it's going to be just as light as what you saw the Cubs get back for Bellinger.
It'll either be somebody the Cardinals can put on their roster, like a Cody Petit, like somebody who's like doesn't have much upside, but like fits right in, or it'll be like a 17-year-old in A-ball.
Right. Someone very far away, a low probability of even being a big leaguer. That's just the nature of what you're going to get.
I do think that the Cardinals have to throw money in. I think it's a little bit past where Bellinger is. I don't think if Arenado went on the market right now, did you think somebody would give him 3 and 60?
No. Not quite. No.
Because
of the health.
market really values batted ball stats like Christian Walker has.
Right.
They don't really value like defense at third base,
Not to that level. And again, it's still the defense still grades out good, but how much will the lack of availability potentially increase in the next couple of years too? He's been gutting through it. Over 600 plate appearances each of the last 4 seasons. Maybe it's just the long-term wear and tear has finally caught up on Arenado as well.
Or maybe it's playing through injury and he's out there. Maybe it's a little bit like Manny Machado. We've seen Manny Machado play not poorly, but not as great as he could because he's out there and he's hurt. People talk about having a high pain threshold is, it can be good and bad. He's out there, maybe playing through pain. I think the Brewers could get to the table if it was 3-45. I mean, they put out, how much did they spend on Rhys Hoskins last year?
I should know off the top of my head. It was like 2 and 30, something close to that. Forgot. Yeah, 2 and 34. I actually think they would be. I think they're players for Bregman if Bregman's market drifts on into January. It gives me some Lorenzo Cain vibes a little bit, where they signed Lorenzo Cain because they valued center field defense and the core skills he had as a hitter, and it was a 5-year deal. And by the time year 5 rolled around, it wasn't working out then, but it worked out really well for most of the first 3 years. I think you could see something similar where Bregman could end up there. He might get the number of years he wants or the total dollars he wants.
I bet you more like he gets the AAV and it's a little bit shorter. Like it's more kind of like the Cody Bellinger deal in Chicago, where there's some opt outs and, it's short,
like a three for 85 or something with an opt out or something like that.
Maybe it looks like 4 and 100, but there's an opt out in there where the Brewers are like, he'll probably take that opt out, so. I think that the Brewers are an interesting team, and then the Astros are an interesting team. Like I think they don't get enough credit for being basically a top 5 team, top 6 team in baseball right now. And maybe we don't like some of the moves they've made in terms of why did you get rid of Kyle Tucker. But on the other hand, maybe it's easier for them to go and find some outfielders, especially after they've, I do think that a Christian Walker, Isaac Paredes situation is probably better than Jose Abreu, John Singleton, and Alex Bregman, at least in year 1, And with Paredes, they have him for a little bit longer. And Paredes might be a great fit just in the same way that Bregman was. He's just going to hit to the Crawford boxes. So, they're a top 6 team right now, and their outfield is Chas McCormick, Jake Myers, and Taylor Trammell. And if you look at what's available in the outfield, there's Teoscar, Santander. I don't think they'll do Jock Peterson because they've talked about wanting to put Yordan Alvarez more at DH, but
they need Bader, guys. They need to add a guy that can play a lot in the outfield because Yordan should really only play there a little. That's where I'm at with the options. So a lot of those top end, like second tier outfielders that we see as below average defenders that will likely have to DH a lot, even on a multi-year deal, right? It's not totally unlike the situation the Dodgers have with Ohtani sort of taking that spot. Alvarez is mostly a DH for Houston. And now that you've got Walker for 3 years at first base, you've really limited yourself as far as how you can get guys to fit. But still, there are options.
I bet you they re-sign Hayward. Just bring him back and put him in a platoon with somebody in one of those corner outfield situations. Jake Myers plays enough, good defense, and I don't think they're done. There's the outfield doesn't look like one for a contender.
I actually think Max Kepler would have been a good fit for Houston. He ends up in Philadelphia, which could also be fine because we had corner outfield as one of the spots flagged. Philly's corner outfield as a clear area of need.
If you throw that up there, it's last.
Brutal.
Look at It's bold and white. And look, the Astros is second to last. But the Astros, the Phillies were a full win below with their corner outfield, below the Astros, who were second worst among contenders. So getting 2 wins projected from their corner outfield for a team like the Phillies did not make sense. And so they went out and they spent, I think it was 1 and 10 to get Max Kepler and put him at least in a platoon in the outfield. Some people were saying like, oh, he's never played left field. I don't know that there's a huge difference between left field and right field. I mean, yes, there might be nuances, but in terms of the skills you need to play either, we're talking about a difference in arm maybe. The balls are going to, kind of slice in different directions. But if you've seen the ball in the right field, I think you can do it in left field. You know what I mean? And now it's I wouldn't say it's one of the strongest outfields among contenders, but at least there's some complementary pieces here in terms of lefty righty. I think Kepler and Rojas are basically in a platoon where Rojas plays center against left-handers and Brandon Marsh plays left against left-handers. And then Kepler will play against all right-handers. That's how I would see it happening. That does reduce his value a little bit in fantasy leagues and makes him only a platoon outfielder, but a $10 million deal these days is not even paying for a win. So what they're hoping for is basically a guy who is so good in platoon. He's, kind of a league average player. They get him for $10 million. He plays well. And part of it is, if you look at his spray charts, just like with Cody Bellinger, I see, 6, 7, 8, maybe as much as 10 more homers for Kepler if he just overlaid all his balls on Philly. And again, all the caveats apply. But Philly is kind of a smaller park than Minnesota. It's a much more hitter-friendly park than Minnesota. It's smaller even in left field. So Kepler might actually hit an Oppo homer. He hasn't in a while. And it's warmer in Philadelphia than it is in Minnesota. So I think this will be good for Kepler's per game numbers. I do wonder how much he gives back in weekly leagues and in terms of how often he's going to sit against lefties. He didn't really sit against lefties in Minnesota, and he probably should have. He has pretty terrible splits against lefties.
Yeah, but I do think the park boost is worth mentioning. I mean, it Target Field, the rolling 3-year park factor for homers for lefties is a 104. Not a bad place for lefties whatsoever, tick above average. Citizens Bank Park in Philly is second only to Great American Ballpark with a 127 park factor. So that is a massive upgrade for his home park for that particular category, right? Like that's huge for him. So I do like that. And by the way, just for context, I don't think we mentioned this with Bellinger. Wrigley Field is a 90 home run park factor for lefties. Yankee Stadium's a 119. So that's a big switch. Yeah, he went from the 23rd ranked park for left-handed homers to 3rd with the move into Yankee
doesn't
Stadium.
Enjoy shaving.
Yeah, he's going to look a little weird with the.
Max Fried looked a little weird.
Yeah, that's the cost of doing business with the Yankees, though. I mean,
Max Fried looked like he was 16 years old. It was crazy.
But you know what? If I had to clear out the facial hair because I was an employee of the Yankees, I probably wouldn't have to shovel my own driveway anymore. So I wouldn't need the beard in the first place. So it would all work out.
It all comes together.
Speaking of
Sounds
New
like
York,
a plan. DVR.
Yeah, no, it's a plan.
It's not a contract with the Yankees.
It's a plan. But I offer them. I have nothing to offer them.
Yeah, right.
Griffin Canning ends up with the Mets. I think we were a little split.
Nothing to offer. No, that's not bad. That's
where you were going to go.
That's rude. No, it's rude. I was just being rude.
I like Griffin Canning, at least a little bit, because he's not an angel anymore. And I mean, that's the best thing about any pitcher. Well, I mean, there's a few other things that could be a little better, but that's a pretty good trait. I'm not an angel anymore. Griffin Canning has at least at one point in the not so distant past flashed a very good K rate, or at least a good K rate, 25.9% back in 2023. Yes, all of just a year ago. Had a career best 6.7% walk rate. Has always had home run problems. Oh, guess what? Citi Field will help with those home run problems. And we've talked about this a few times going back to the arrival of David Stearns to head up the front office for the Mets. But this is an organization that we think is probably going to understand how to find and improve pitching. So if you're going to start with Griffin Canning and you're to say, in 23, he showed us the best skills of his career. In 24, he gave us the biggest workload we've ever seen before, the 171 and 2/3 innings. I can at least see him as a comfortable guy I want on my roster as like an 8th or 9th starter that I'm going to plan on using at home and hopefully even use occasionally on the road with a few tweaks, because there are some skills there to work with.
Yeah, when we said that the Mets had to spend at every level of starting pitching, that there was. And so far, they've given us sort of the mid-level signing with Clay Holmes, putting him in there. I think this is sort of the back-end signing to help with, if Paul Blackburn's not ready, or if he's not good, or if Kodai Senga's hurt, or, Montas has been hurt over the years. So, he represents depth to some extent. He, like McGill, I think depends a fair amount on velo for their fastball. Canning has a pretty poor shape on his fastballs right now. And so maybe he goes to the pen and he out velos the shape, and he relies on that slider that's always been good, and the changeup's pretty good. And then he just has more velo in the pen. That's an option that we haven't seen play out in Anaheim yet. And then on top of that, the Mets, we saw in the postseason, they had the most starters in the postseason with 3 fastballs. So let's say they say to Canning, hey, none of your fastballs are good, but let's have 3 of them. Let's have 3 mediocre fastballs and see how it goes. And I just saw a post on Bluesky from Matt Eddy over at Baseball America, talking about how this is the way in the Mets minor league system. It is called the fastball triangle. And this is what they're teaching all of their young pitchers coming through. So Canning really hasn't had a year where he's really been throwing 3 fastballs with any regularity. So they could say, hey, maybe your fastballs are mediocre, but they don't know which one's coming. And that's your way out. But anybody who has a really good slider and a really good changeup deserves a chance. And that's what Griffin Canning's getting. $4.5 million is a major league shot in the dark for the Mets. And so I can't really say anything bad about this signing.
No, it's a bargain in a free agent market that hasn't really had them. And I think that might be reflected in what Michael Soroka got from the Nationals. He's going to get a chance to start going to DC. But Soroka had a weird year with the White Sox. Was not good as a starter. Made the move to the bullpen. Had a 39% K rate as a reliever. Also had like a 12% walk rate, which is very uncharacteristic for him. It was a 189, 303, 291 line allowed in relief, 275 ERA. This to me kind of feels like let's try to start him again, see what we can do. If it doesn't work, throw him in the pen and he becomes maybe tradable mid-season, because it won't be the first time he worked in that role. There were some changes he made in relief too, so maybe a few of those changes can stick. And we saw some interesting things from Sean Doolittle and the pitching staff in DC last year, so maybe there's some more adjustments on the way for Soroka.
Yeah, he was a little bit more 92, 93 as a starter, and then at the end of the season, more 94, 95, even sat 95 for an entire appearance, but a little bit more 90, 93, 94 as a reliever. But that wasn't the only thing that changed for Michael Soroka when he became a reliever. He also added ride on the fastball. And so, there's some difference there mechanically. It's hard to kind of separate that from his relief appearances where he was kind of up and down to really settling in. His starting appearances where he's kind of up and down with the ride to where he really settled in and showed his best ride at the end of the season. Maybe he was just, that's what they're betting. Is like, maybe that ride will stick. But he's also a guy like Canning that has shown a pretty good slider. It is a really weird slider. It is not one, Stuff Plus likes it. And so, I'm predisposed to liking it. But it's kind of like a really slow gyro slider. It doesn't have a lot of movement, but it's 81 miles an hour.
Is it weird enough to be good, or is it just weird in a way where once hitters kind of get a good look at it, they're going to start punishing it more.
It has a little bit of an element of a power curve, an 82 mile an hour, pitch with this much. It does have a little bit more drop than your regular gyro slider. So that's true. And then also he threw 564 of them last year. It's a fair amount of them. And batters hit 167 with a 298 slugging. So there's a little bit of a proof of the pudding. You're right, though. That's the first time he unveiled it, right? He kind of was like, this is new. And everyone's like, whoa, what is that? What happens? But then again, he's going from the Chicago White Sox to the Washington Nationals. It's not like a lot of people in the AL East, the NL East will have seen this pitch. So I think it's a decent bid, but I will say it's $9 million for a guy who's popped his Achilles twice, been one of the most injured guys. It's not like the Clay Holmes situation where you're like, well, he's been healthy and he's demonstrated all this stuff. It's like they paid for a month of work. That's not even, Stuff Plus isn't even like, big thumbs up. Stuff Plus is like, yeah, maybe
could work.
So, and it was 9 million, not 4.5 million.
Yeah, it's a little more aggressive for sure, just in the scope of a 1-year deal, which is not very aggressive as a group.
Right, overall, anyway, yeah.
I think the other thing about Soroka, though, adding ride and being a guy that was much more sinker heavy earlier in his career, and he's kind of rebuilt himself coming off the major injuries, added extension. There's just a lot that's changed for him, but maybe you're kind of buying into the ability to adjust. Like that's sort of the thing you're looking at and saying, okay, this stuff wasn't working before, but he was already making some changes, and those changes were popping in ways that make him a more interesting pitcher. We'll gamble at $9 million on that. Like that's probably what they were thinking. I mean, the depth chart right now, Mackenzie Gore, Jake Irvin, Mitchell Parker, DJ Hers, and then Soroka is probably the 5 as things stand right now. This has a clear path if he pitches well to be a starter when the season begins.
He's not blocking anybody either. If they want to pull one of these, vintage Mike Rizzo starting pitcher, we just signed Corbin Burns, like, Mike Soroka, or Cade Cavalli stays in the minor leagues a little bit longer,
Right. Yeah. There's still it's still a pretty soft depth chart, even with the addition of Soroka. So yeah, that doesn't really rule out anything as a possibility for the Nats. Nearby, the Orioles added a pitcher without any sort of qualifying offer attached. Tomoyuki Sugano will head to Baltimore. Another righty. Their projected starting 5 right now: Grayson Rodriguez, Zach Eflin, Dean Kramer, Sugano, Albert Suarez, all righties, which is okay, I guess. That's just kind of an odd quirk. Sugano has had a great career in Japan, and there were rumblings in the past that he was trying to come over, ended up getting, I think, a 4-year deal with his team Yomiuri in Japan to stay, and had chances to leave, but decided to just ride it out there, and comes over at a more advanced age and with less stuff than he had when he first surfaced on the radar as somebody that would make the leap from NPB. He got $13 million. So of these 3 1-year deals, the most expensive of all, it looks like it's really turned into a command control heavy profile, though, because the swing and miss has been fading. And I wonder what that does for the projections. Like, what kind of pitcher do you think Tomoyuki Sugano is going to be making the leap to face big leaguers at this juncture of his career?
It would have been a better deal a couple years ago. He's 34 now. And, in 2023, he only pitched 86 innings. There were some health problems there. And when he was at 31 at 2021, 119 innings. So he used to be more of a workhorse than he's been recently. But he is coming off 156 innings in his age 34 season in Japan, where Tomoyuki Sugano had a 1.67 ERA and kind of a really resurgent year. It was the first year in 4 years that he had an ERA under 3. The problem is that he still only struck out 7.6 per 9, which, even with his low walk rate, it's even less impressive if you turn it into a percentage. It would be, as a percentage, he struck out 18% of the batters he saw. And just to give you a sense of like what that is like, for major league qualified starting pitchers last year. 18% would put him with J.P. Sears, Patrick Corbin. Jameson Taillon is like, I think the really good outcome for him, but he's there with Tyler Anderson, Jose Quintana. It's not really a great place to be. And from his stuff numbers, from his movement numbers, he basically has a 92 mile an hour fastball that has average ride. And yes, his other pitches are good, but another thing that's weird is all of his pitches are between 82 and 92. So he doesn't really have this like large band of velo. What he does have is a split finger that's really good, a sweeper that's really good. So he has a wide arsenal. And then the best thing about Tomoyuki Sugano is just a really tiny walk rate. He walked 1.7 per 9 in his entire 12 seasons in Japan. And so I don't know who's the best comp. Like a Miles Michaelis is a good comp. Maybe Taillon is a good comp in terms of, pairing that with velo. Michaelis is where's Michaelis in terms of velo? 93 too. So Michaelis is even higher than that. So Taillon is what you're hoping for. 92 mile an hour fastball, good bendy pitches, maybe a better changeup than Taillon has. But people are saying, oh, well, aren't these all the same things you would have said about Shota Imanaga? I would say no. Imanaga has like really plus ride. His fastball, despite being 92 miles an hour, has much better shape than Sugano's. And also, Shota is younger than Sugano. So we're talking about a 34-year-old. The risk is just that, honestly, that they DFA him. I mean, the risk is the roster slot, not so much the money, because it's 1 year and $13 million. The risk is, resources in terms of time and energy and who they think he can be. I don't have him circled as a huge sleeper.
So you would, just looking at competition for spots, how do you compare him to Kramer, who's ahead of him on the depth chart, and Suarez, who's behind him? I mean, do you think he's
that's where he belongs.
A little less exciting than Kramer, but a little more exciting or a little more viable than Suarez?
Yeah, I mean, if Kramer has really pushed any of his pitches, like maybe the split finger to an out pitch, he would be, I think, a better pitcher. But he belongs in that group. He's just very much not a Grayson Rodriguez for me. But Cade Povich, he's better than Rogers. He's better than Suarez. So I would put Sugano as their 4, Povich as their 5, and Suarez as their 6, Rogers as their 7.
And even Suarez, I mean, the command probably isn't at the same level as Sugano's, but 94.8 on the fastball last year, just a lot more velo to work with. So I think that's going to make things tricky for Sugano. I think you could probably look at him as a fringe top 300 overall guy. Like the Jameson Taillon comp seems pretty fair as far as your high end outcome. Still useful, still a good big league pitcher, but not necessarily someone you're thinking about in shallow leagues as someone who sticks on your roster and is going to carry you to a title. That seems pretty far-fetched.
I can tell you from trying to trade Jameson Taillon in my dynasty league that he doesn't have that much value in those leagues. It was a deep one too.
Yeah, people were curious though, because it wasn't the first time that Sugano was trying to come over, and this time it's going to be for that 1-year deal in Baltimore. All right, I teased this at the top of the show. You are wrestling with that Hall of Fame ballot. You got the whiteout hiding off screen somewhere.
I can reveal what I have. I don't think there's anything.
He's just gonna hold it up to the camera?
No, I'm not. Here you go. Have at it. No, I am my definites for going in. They were on previous ballots, and I've kind of gone through them. Carlos Beltran is a definite for me. Billy Wagner has already gotten my vote. Ichiro is a definite. So those are like the easiest 3 for me. And so then I did some more research where I started looking at combing through I want them to be in the top 1% for their cohort. So they're the 10 years around them, When I did that, it became pretty obvious that CC, Sabathia, deserves inclusion. And once I did that, Felix Hernandez looked like, to me, someone who really deserved my vote. Then there are some players with a little bit more flawed candidacies for different reasons, but I thought they needed my vote, or that I should vote for them, which were Andrew Jones, Chase Utley, Andy Pettitte. There's different issues with all of them. I just, for whatever reason, don't think that Andy Pettitte's HGH situation raises to the level of the Alex Rodriguez and Manny Ramirez situations. I know that Andrew Jones had some issues in his personal life, but I think he's one of the best center field defenders of all time. And he also added a fair amount of homers and offense. It's not like he was just one note. And Chase Utley was great, and he should have won more Gold Gloves. So I'm not going to hold his lack of Gold Gloves against him. It was the fact that people didn't vote for him is not my problem. So Chase Utley was a great defender and a great hitter, and just didn't have the greatest denouement. Brian McCann passes the 1% list. So that's my 9. And Brian McCann, for what it's worth, he was a great framer, second best of all time, maybe. But the offense was there. So this is where it gets interesting. That's 9. I'm allowed to have 10. So there's been a lot of talk about Russell Martin. And, I agree with a lot of people who do the sniff test and say, nope, not there for me. Because I watched Russell Martin and I enjoyed him. Like, I thought he was a character. I thought he was cool. Like, just a really interesting guy. I remember that he stole bases, and he's a different body type than a lot of guys. He was quicker, and he was an interesting interview, and he just seemed like an interesting guy. But never once did I think I was watching a Hall of Famer. And what's weird about that is around that time, he was one of the very first sort of pioneers of observable, quantifiable framing. And he was excellent at it. And wherever he went, he won. And he was underrated. And it was good. He was really good at framing. Now you could say, okay, we have guys in who are great defenders. We have guys in who are great on offense who were bad defenders. Why can't we put in a guy that, like Russell Martin, that was great at defending and great at framing and maybe not so great on offense? We might put in Yadier Molina soon, and the difference between Yadier Molina and Russell Martin is not there for me in terms of numbers and what's on the page. One difference, though, is that Yadier Molina was the one guy in St. Louis forever, and everybody who played with him was like, he was the guy, and there are things that we won't be able to put numbers on that maybe Yadier Molina was great at in terms of game calling, leadership. That seems to make sense. Why would they keep signing this guy that doesn't have great offense unless there was a lot of other things there? Like, he was really the captain of a lot of those teams. Now, back to Russell Martin and Yadier Molina and Brian McCann. All of the best framing seasons of all time come from the same 8-year span. The first years we started measuring it. Mm-hmm. And there's this great Jeff Sullivan piece where he went in, he looked at it, and he found that the standard deviation in framing was getting smaller every year. Why? Because we measure it. And there was a saying that once you measure it, it's dead. Everybody knows about it. Once you measure it, we've got to figure it out.
Well, you're coaching. So what happened is you're preparing for it,
and you know about it, and so that you're not. So Ryan Domit, and Mike Petriello has some stuff about this, but Ryan Domit was in the league and a catcher during Russell Martin's time, and he was getting like 35% of borderline calls as strikes. There's nobody in the league who does that now. The barrier for entry to getting into the league as a catcher, you cannot be as bad as Ryan Domit was at framing back then. Like, you need to get at least like 45% now. Like, that's how much, like, nobody would let him catch now. And of course that does something to your value. So you could take everything that Russell Martin did on the field and put it in now's game, and he wouldn't get the same value because it's all respect to your peers, right? So nobody's as bad as Ryan Domit, so his framing would be less valuable in today's game. And then on top of it, you just look at his offensive numbers and they leave me cold. 190 homers, 100 steals, like a 720 OPS or something, 730 OPS. It's like, I don't know, those numbers. So I'm really struggling with Russell Martin because I get the framing argument, but I also wonder if it just happened a little time. But this can happen too. You know what Babe Ruth, he had a 380 ISO. You know what the league ISO was? Isolated slugging? Right now it's like 160.
Back then it's probably like 0.90.
Yeah. Yeah, it was like 0.95.
Yeah. I mean,
do we hold that against Babe Ruth?
No, of course not.
So I don't know, man. I'm struggling with that one. I voted for Bobby Abreu in the past, but he's right at 1.5%. So he's actually kind of borderline even with my 1%, 1.5% rule. I like Mark Burley. He's in by a 1% rule, but have you looked at Mark Burley's ERA? It's like
that's a sniff test. That's a sniff test guy for me.
Sniff test is bad for me too.
Great career, but not. I never watched Mark Burley and thought this guy's a Hall of Famer. I watched Mark Burley and said, I understand why the people in the press box love this guy, as they are going to be home before dinner is done when Mark Burley is pitching. Right. Good pitcher again. Good career.
Jimmy Rollins is somebody that I think when I was a younger person, I thought maybe he's a Hall of Famer, but I've just looked at his numbers. And I think he was inflated a little bit by Philly offensively, and he wasn't that great defensively. So he's just a really good player, I think. And then here's a little bit of a controversial take. So I would have voted for Barry Bonds if he was on this. I'm kind of mad that Barry Bonds is not in. And given that Barry Bonds is in, I don't want to put Alex Rodriguez in. It doesn't make any sense for me to put Alex Rodriguez in if Barry Bonds is not in. You know what I mean?
So now because of this, yeah, but this turns into such a mess.
It is a mess. I promise you, if people had one of these ballots in front of themselves, they'd be surprised by how many loops they could think themselves into.
Well, and there's also, you mentioned Andrew Jones, right? Domestic violence is there. You could just rule him out solely based on that. And I don't think you're wrong to make that call.
So many bad people in the Hall of Fame.
Right. But then there's people in that you find out after they got in it's just all of those little wrinkles give you different things to think about. And I don't know. I don't think of the catchers you're talking about, none of them feel like Hall of Famers to me. Yachty's the only one. I think Yachty's the one that is the guy that gets in. I
might have some Atlanta bias with Brian McCann, but offensively, he was at least he was 10% better than league average as an offensive. He's got a 790 OPS. He was pretty good offensively and a great framer, and 282 homers. We also don't put enough catchers in. So you could just say, hey, vote for all the catchers because we just don't have that many Hall of Fame catchers.
Yeah, there's that. Or there's maybe that's something that the committee has to get right over time, later on. It's weird. It's weird to even think about it that way because you have the choice to do something about it on your ballot right now. But my gut is of all those names that you mentioned.
No, I didn't say the one I might vote for now.
Well, Bobby, of the ones you mentioned so far, Abreu is the one where I'm like, David Wright? Nah, David Wright.
No, too short.
Too short. Yeah, David Wright. I think it's what could have been sort of career, a foundation that at one time looked like he'd be on that sort of trajectory, but I think he comes up just short.
50 WAR is kind of the barrier to entry. He has 51.3. 242 homers. He has a pretty good OPS, 867 OPS, but we also didn't see the bad years, because it was so short. You kind of almost want to have a better peak if you don't have the bad years. You know what I mean?
Geez, David Wright played 77 games from age 32 on in the big leagues. That is
spinal stenosis, not good.
Brutal, just brutal.
I do. Let's open this up to the Discord. So. If you had one vote, Abreu, I'd just throw A-Rod in there. Let the world burn. Bobby Abreu, Alex Rodriguez, David Wright, and Russell Martin. Who gets your vote?
Yeah, make your case in the Discord. It's got to be a fun thing to be a part of, but I can see where you're just running circles.
Influenced me because I'm hurting on this one.
Well, you're going to tick a 10th box. At least you're not going to say, you know what? I only see 9.
Oh, my gosh. I still can't believe that the Athletic voted one guy in. This is a pretty loaded ballot, if you ask me.
I'm with you. I think it's a loaded ballot as well. But we'll save that that conversation for the Discord. More to come on that front, I'm sure. And you still, like I said, you got 10 days at the time of this recording to get that thing in the mail, 11 days to get that thing in the mail. So you can still sway Eno.
Think about it a little longer.
A little bit. Join the Discord with the link in the show description. You can find us on the Bluesky. Eno is at enosaris.bsky.social. I am ddr.bsky.social. We hope everybody out there has a safe and happy holiday season. We'll have another episode coming out in about a week. A little lighter programming here around the holidays before we ramp it back up in early January. So that's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you next week.
Thanks for listening.